Evolution. I'm sure already by looking at this presentation, this has caught all of your attention. It's a pretty big buzzword used today, but what does it mean to us as believers? How do we prove or disprove evolution? All over the world, evolutionists believe that animals somehow evolved from one common ancestor over the course of hundreds of millions of years. I'm a nursing major, and in my courses in science, we try to learn from a biblical worldview in which we are taught that evolution is false, but there is something called adaptation, which we do see in nature. There's also the big discussion on evolution versus creation. I believe, and hopefully all of you believe, that God created the universe in 7 days. This is the Genesis account, Genesis 1 to 3. And he created all of the plants and all of the animals in these 7 days. And I'm sure there's fossils, records, and everything. Sorry. I stuck that, whatever. There's fossil records that Josiah will go over in more detail in order to disprove this theory of evolution. But I want to start out with, try to think of a bird and a fish. These are two completely separate animals, but evolutionists believe that at some point they had some sort of ancestor. But those are obviously super different, but what about something that's a little bit closer? Think about the Great Dane and the Chihuahua. These are somehow the same exact species, but they haven't evolved to be different. They're both still a dog. So if they haven't evolved, what have they gone through? Well, they've gone through this process of adaptation. In an experiment done by Charles Darwin, he went to the Galapagos Islands, which was a very secluded place, and he found a species of finch there. These finches, over time, went through a process called natural selection, which changed the genetic makeup of their population. However, their gene pool, if I can use the board, this is their gene pool. It stayed completely the same, just over time, different genes became expressed. According to LibreText, this natural selection is a process in which individual organisms or phenotypes that possess favorable traits are more likely to survive and reproduce. That means a bird with a bigger beak can eat bigger seeds, but not smaller ones. So if there's smaller seeds available, the bigger beaks will die off and the smaller beaks will survive. According to LibreTexts, large-billed finches feed easier on the large hard seeds, while smaller-billed finches eat easier with the small and soft seeds. And again, they all have the same genetic makeup, but there's different genes that they express in order to be more successful at surviving. According to LibreTexts, they define evolution as the change in the genetic composition of a population over successive generations. However, this gene pool is still exactly the same for all of those finches, has been and it will be. They just expressed different traits. Now I want to move on to another experiment. This was done, I think, in the 70s. Dolly the lamb. This was the first example of cloning. This is a huge, huge advancement in the technology of genetic editing, and it's cloning. According to Britannica, cloning is the process of generating a genetically identical copy of a cell or organism. In nature, twins are considered clones, and I am an identical twin. So, by nature's standards, I am a clone. But what does this mean today? Well, it means clones can exist, and I think that Kanye West is one of them. But that's aside from the point. With all of these advances in cloning and the adaptation, what does this mean? Well, there's been a company called Colossal who has recently gone through a huge breakthrough discovery by claiming that they de-extincted the dire wolf. However, the dire wolf is not a de-extinct species and is in fact the creation of an entirely new synthetic species. First of all, the gray wolf that they based the dire wolf off of is not its closest ancestor according to the fossil records. According to National Geographic, the closest ancestor was supposedly an African jackal. And there's also the issue of an ecological hole, which is where a predator preys on the prey. There's no need for the dire wolf because there's no ecological hole for it anymore. This animal went extinct 13,000 years ago. Other predators have taken its place to prey on the prey. Now, there is an argument that Colossal is working on for the Tasmanian tiger or the thylacine. This was an animal that, according to CBS News, went extinct in 1936. That is so much closer. That's less than 100 years since this animal has gone extinct. This was an animal that lived in the northern parts of Australia. And they also have a closer living relative called the fat-tailed dunnart. This is a marsupial, so if you think of a kangaroo, they have a pouch. This small-tailed dunnart and the thylacine both have pouches. That's how they reproduce. Now, with a closer living specimen of the DNA, not living, with a closer preserved specimen of the DNA, is this actually going to be a proper de-extinction? No, it's not, and let me explain. With the dire wolf, and as well as with the thylacine, you took the gene pool from this animal that we still have, let it be the gray wolf or the dunnart, and what you've done is you have taken out a portion of this DNA and you have filled in your own DNA that you have found in a lab. So this completely goes past just adaptation and natural selection where different genes get expressed. We are taking out genes and putting brand new ones in. But also, there was a bigger hole left. I was talking the ecology for the dire wolf. With it being extinct in 1936, there are still animals that the thylacine can prey on. There's still a hole that this animal can fill. Regardless, it'll still be synthetic. Now, what I was talking about with the genes getting swapped, Colossal determined that there were 12 out of 20 genes that they would swap with the gray wolf in order to make the dire wolf. Now, there are a lot of issues with this. The gray wolf is smaller than the dire wolf, and they're trying to make the dire wolf grow bigger. There's going to be less cancer regulatory cells. These animals are going to be more prone to cancer. But other than that, adaptation, which is the process that I believe in instead of evolution, expresses different genes while keeping the same genetic makeup. We have taken the genes out, put new ones in, therefore it's synthetic. Dire wolf is not a de-extinct species and is in fact a synthetic species. You know about what people believe evolution is and what we can more accurately see with the process of adaptation through the Galapagos finch experiment. And you can also see some of the more recent advances in genetic engineering with Dolly the lamb in the cloning experiment. I hope I've opened your eyes to the very real possibility of what this technology can do. Colossal got their ancestor wrong, and they can make a lot more than just a dire wolf. And the tiger, the thylacine, would still be a synthetic species, regardless of how close they get it. Think about the future. It's closer than you think.